Brentwood, California is known for its quiet, multi-million-dollar estates and its high-profile residents. But on the afternoon of December 14th, the silence of this upscale neighborhood was shattered by a single 911 call, one that would send shockwaves through Hollywood and the world. Inside a sprawling home, the legendary director of A Few Good Men and The Princess Bride, Rob Reiner, 78, and his wife of 36 years, Michele Singer Reiner, 70, were found dead. They hadn't simply passed away, they had been brutally stabbed to death in what investigators are calling a targeted and violent attack. As the film industry began to mourn a comedy giant, police were already closing in on a suspect. And the truth was more tragic than any movie Rob Reiner ever directed. Just 6 hours after the bodies were discovered, police found the couple's 32-year-old son, Nick Reiner, hiding near the University of Southern California campus. He was arrested without incident and later charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. But as the case now moves toward a February arraignment, a new mystery has emerged. Alan Jackson, the high-profile attorney who previously defended Karen Reed and Harvey Weinstein, has suddenly walked away from the case. Just moments before Nick was set to enter a plea, Jackson stood before the cameras, declared his former client not guilty, and then cited circumstances beyond his control as the reason he could no longer represent him. So the question is, what did Alan Jackson see inside that evidence file that made it impossible to continue? Today, on Homicide Report, we're diving deep into the Reiner tragedy, the family's shouting matches, the history of mental illness, and the unforeseen reasons that have left a Hollywood legacy in ruins.
I have parents that care about me, and because of that, when I would go out and do, things like drugs and stuff like that, I'd feel a tremendous amount of guilt because I'd think, oh, they're thinking about me right now. They want me to do good.
Deep down, he trusted that we loved him and that we were there for him, and that put a little bit of a brake on certain things. I mean, it's a desire to survive.
Yeah.
To understand how we got to that bloody night in Brentwood, we have to look at the complex life of Nick Reiner. Nick was the third of Rob's 4 children, and while he grew up in the shadow of Hollywood royalty, his life was far from a fairy tale. In the past, Nick has been open about his struggles with addiction, including heroin use, and even periods of homelessness. But behind the addiction was a far more serious battle. New reports reveal that Nick was diagnosed with schizophrenia and schizoaffective disorder years ago. In fact, from 2020 to 2021, Nick was placed under a court-ordered mental health conservatorship after being deemed unable to care for himself. His parents, Rob and Michele, reportedly tried for years to support him. They paid for high-end rehabilitation programs and specialized mental health care. But that support often came with strain. Sources say Nick felt strained by his parents' constant intervention, and that tension appears to have reached a breaking point just 24 hours before the murders. On the night of December 13th, Nick attended a holiday party with his father at the home of talk show host Conan O'Brien. Guests later described Nick's behavior as uncomfortable, and at one point, Rob and Nick were reportedly heard in a heated shouting match before leaving the event. The next morning, the shouting stopped. The Los Angeles County Medical Examiner's Office ruled that Rob and Michele died from multiple sharp force injuries, stab wounds so severe, death occurred within minutes.
This morning, I had to withdraw as Nick Reiner's counsel. Circumstances beyond our control, but more importantly, circumstances beyond Nick's control, have dictated that, sadly, it's made it impossible for us to continue our representation of Nick. I'm legally and I'm ethically prohibited from explaining all the reasons why. I know that's a question on everybody's mind. We expect the public defender to step in. They've already been appointed and very capably protect Nick Reiner's interests as he moves forward through the system. But be clear, be very, very clear about this. My team and I remain deeply committed.
When Nick Reiner first appeared in court on December 17th, he looked like a shell of the man seen on red carpets just months earlier. He was wearing a blue anti-suicide smock, his head was shaved, and he sat behind a glass wall, staring straight ahead. His attorney at the time, Alan Jackson, initially asked the court for more time, saying he needed to review the very complex and serious issues surrounding the case. But by the time the second hearing arrived, on January 7, 2026, the strategy changed completely. Jackson's sudden withdrawal from the case left legal experts baffled. Why would a lawyer who specializes in so-called indefensible cases walk away from one of the biggest trials in the country? Jackson told reporters, "You can take this to the bank. Nick Reiner is not guilty of murder." Yet despite that declaration, he handed the case over to a public defender, citing ethical prohibitions that prevented him from explaining why. One theory now emerging from inside the jailhouse centers on Nick's mental state. While he was recently taken off suicide watch at the Twin Towers Correctional Facility, Nick remains housed in a high-observation mental health unit. Doctors have officially determined that he suffers from a mental disability. And there are reports that just 1 month before the stabbings, Nick's medications were changed, a shift that allegedly caused him to struggle significantly with reality. So the question becomes, is it possible that Nick's defense will rely entirely on an insanity plea? While the legal defense remains in flux, the prosecution is moving forward with an iron fist. Nick Reiner is officially charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder with special circumstances. In the state of California, the allegation of multiple murders in a single case automatically triggers these special circumstances. This is where the case becomes a matter of life or death. Because of these specific charges, the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office now has to make a monumental decision, whether to seek the death penalty or life in prison without the possibility of parole. While California currently has a moratorium on executions, a death sentence remains a legal possibility that would keep Nick behind bars for the rest of his life under the highest level of security. However, the case took another bizarre turn just this week. On January 11th, a judge ordered that the death records for Rob and Michele Reiner be sealed from the public. This is an incredibly rare move in a homicide case and has sparked intense speculation. Experts suggest that the autopsy reports may contain details so graphic or so specific to Nick's mental state at the time that the court believes their release would make a fair trial impossible. The impact of this loss has paralyzed the entertainment industry. Rob Reiner wasn't just a director. He was a bridge to Hollywood's golden age, the son of the legendary Carl Reiner, and a man who helped shape American comedy for more than half a century. Tributes have poured in from peers like Billy Crystal, Tom Hanks, and Rob's longtime friend Bill Hader, who was reportedly one of the last people to see Nick before the tragedy. Hader later described a strange interaction with Nick, just 24 hours before the bodies were found. Even those closest to the family could sense that something was deeply wrong. As we now wait for the next hearing, the question remains: was this the act of a cold-blooded killer, or the final tragic breakdown of a man lost inside a mental health crisis? Competency hearings are expected to begin soon, and if a judge determines that Nick Reiner is not competent to stand trial, he may never face a jury, instead spending the rest of his life inside a state psychiatric facility. For the Reiner family, there are no winners. A legacy of laughter and storytelling has ended in a nightmare of blood and betrayal. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into Hollywood's darkest hour. If you found this report helpful, please hit the like button and subscribe to Homicide Report as we continue to follow the legal battle surrounding the Reiner family. And now we ask you, what do you believe led to this tragedy? Leave your